One, thank you for your patience. As I said on the other live stream just a moment ago, we had some technical difficulties, but we're all up and running now. So welcome. I'll give the people a few more minutes to join the live stream. So for now, just relax. All right, here we go. Again, welcome. Thank you for your patience. Take a deep breath and relax the thinking mind. Give your conceptual thinking mind a break. Give it back to life. Give it back to source. Give it back to consciousness, pure consciousness. And see through the mist of thinking into that center, into that stable place of I am. Now, what I'm going to be sharing with you today is going to be an elaboration on the topic that we discussed yesterday, or in the previous session. And I was questioning whether to teach this or not because it is a little bit more advanced, and I want to keep this course as simple and accessible as I can. However, the nature of this topic is such that when it is understood, once you have an image of this, once you have even just a conceptual understanding of it, it's going to take away potentially years of confused or misguided meditations. So people have a lot of challenges with their meditations, and a lot of questions come up when they meditate. And a lot of them has to do with this topic, but this topic is hardly ever taught. And if it is taught, it's taught in a very conceptual way, kind of cloaked or hidden in between the other concepts of that particular path, or typically Eastern paths. So I want to give you a really clear and grounded understanding of this phenomenon, which is the concept of having different bodies. And these different bodies are kind of like stages or levels or like floors of a building that you will enter into as you deepen your meditation. So, as we've already discussed in the previous session, on the initial graph that I drew, and you can put up this graph right now, this one that's already on. Yes, okay. All right, so you're familiar with this graph if you've checked out the last session. So here, the square on the right represents the physical body. Then the waves represent the mind, or as I'll continue to explain, the mental body, or the subtle body, as it's also called. And then the point of view represents the witness, the individual witness. And the kind of bowl-shaped, or like satellite dish shape, if you will, representing the edge of a sphere, but it's a 2D representation, so it looks kind of like a bowl, but it's really supposed to be kind of like a satellite dish, or like a bowl shaped, a big bowl. And that represents the God state, or the pure I am, the true universal I am, the true universal consciousness, which you hear a lot of sort of teachers and teachings talk about. Is that state of oneness, it's that state of universal consciousness, that state of pure isness, that state which is the substratum of all things, of all appearances, of all experiences and perceptions. And then the question mark and or the infinity symbol represents kind of the infinite, indescribable, absolute, out of which even that consciousness, beingness, bliss arose, that awareness, love, light, that God principle. So you're familiar with that, and then if we can swap over to the next slide, the next piece of paper. You will see that I drew circles around these items, these symbols, and these represent the bodies. So sorry, there's some distractions going on. 1 second. So the main concept I want you to get today, which I'll get to, and it is the understanding of what's represented here by the green circle, or I've called it there nothingness in this graph or diagram, but it's what's been called the causal body in some of the Indian teachings. It's also been called the bliss body or the Anandamaya kosha. All right, let me know when we're good. Okay. Cool. Are we good? Ready to go? All right. So then minimize the walking, please. Thank you. All right. First, let me get some conceptual stuff out of the way. The concept of a body is a vehicle, but it can also be viewed as a veil. So just like your physical body has the functionality that it has to interact with the physical plane, your mental body, your mind, your subtle body, which here is represented by the waves, has the functionality of operating, of functioning at the subtle planes, or the dream planes, you could say. Like when you go to sleep at night and you start dreaming, you lose all consciousness of your physical environment. You lose consciousness even of your physical body. And what takes place instead is a consciousness of the subtle body. It's a consciousness of the dream body, if you will. And the dream body, or the mind in this case, has the functionality of interacting with that dream world, the world of imagination, the world of thoughts, the world of subconscious projections, the world of impressions and preferences. So when you go to sleep and you enter the dream state, it's basically the subtle body, and you lose awareness of the physical body. All right, so imagine these like shells or like layers that include the former body. So the physical body in this case is enclosed by the mind. And the mind is of a subtler substance. It's of a subtler nature. It's not as dense. It's not as physical. It's not as tangible as we're used to being focused on. Anything that's subtler, when you hear me use the word subtler, it means it's kind of like the sky is subtler than the clouds. The sky can exist without the clouds, but the clouds cannot exist without the sky. So also the sky pervades or permeates the clouds. It's like it interpenetrates. It's like the sky penetrates every aspect of the cloud. And the cloud is just an appearance inside of that subtler space or sky in this case. And so kind of like the, what you call the matryoshka dolls in Russia, where you have different layers. It's a similar idea. And in the East, they've been teaching this system in different ways. There's sort of different philosophies, and they have a lot of similarities. There's like the three-body system, which describes the gross body or the physical body. It describes the subtle body or the mental body or the mind. And it describes a body beyond that, which they call the causal body. In this case, again, that's represented by the body of space or nothingness. And that's the green circle here on this diagram. Then there are systems that teach, that have a fourth body. And the main difference between the fourth body and the three-body system is that in the four-body system, they see also God, which in the three-body system, they view as the true self. And the three bodies, they see kind of like veils that are covering the true self. But in a four-body system, the first three bodies are pretty much exactly the same in their description, but they add a fourth body because they say, and I agree, that even the God state, even Brahman as we know it, even awareness, love, light, even Satchidananda as they call it, even that pure consciousness, that pure I am, that pure beingness, that universal beingness is in essence still a veil. It's still a body. It's not the true self. It's not the absolutely true self. And so that's really the only difference. It's a main difference, but it is the only difference between the three-body or the four-body system. Now then in yoga and some other Vedantic philosophies also, they'll describe the five koshas. I just want to get this out of the way for the scholars among you, I suppose. So the three-body and the five-body system, or the five koshas, is basically the same. So it's the physical, it's the subtle, and it's the causal, which I'll get into, and that's the main thing I want you to walk away with today. Even though it's a little bit more advanced, I'm going to break it down in a way that's directly experiential for you, and it's going to, again, take away years of meditative confusion or confusion in your meditations. It's going to give you something to aim for, something to stabilize in, and the rewards are going to be very much accelerated as compared to not knowing, not having conscious awareness of the causal body. So the three-body system as compared to the five koshas, and after this I'll drop the conceptual part or the scholarly part, is that the five koshas breaks down the subtle body of the mind, the orange circle, the wavy aspect. It breaks it down into three other bodies. But basically these three bodies, so the second, the third, and the fourth body in the five kosha system or five body system together comprise the second body in this three or four body system. Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's kind of guide you through this experience. So self-realization, it really is a science. It's really an art. It's the science of experientially being scientific with yourself, like investigating in a scientific way as you can, but using your direct experience instead of tools and mechanisms and electronic devices. You're using your own attention to investigate what's true. You're using your own attention to sort of go through the different layers of your consciousness and dissect yourself, if you will, investigate, deconstruct, go deeper, meditate, etc. And what you'll find, what I have found in working with as many people as I've worked with, is that these components are universal. That's the only reason I'm even addressing them. And they are helpful in accelerating your meditative process when it comes to self-realization and when it comes to the stabilization of your self-realization. So the art of self-realization really is about answering the question, who am I? What is it that I am? What is it that is me? And consequently, what am I not that I've been identifying with? So it is like peeling away layers of the onion, or like removing dolls from the matryoshka doll. It's like going through different layers, or it's also like stepping into an elevator and rising to the first floor and the second floor and the third floor and the fourth floor, eventually arriving at the rooftop, if you will, where you have this unobstructed view, this 360-degree view, and there's no floor above you anymore. There's no veil, there's no walls around you. You don't have to look through glass windows anymore. It's just the wide open sky as it actually is, using this analogy of the elevator with the different floors. So as you meditate, and I know there's a lot of people that kind of suggest there are no levels and there are no stages. And while you could say that that's ultimately true, I wouldn't agree that that is the majority of people's experience when they start hearing about this and practicing this knowledge. And I've seen so many people get disillusioned with their progress because they didn't know about the causal body. They didn't know about the existence of it. They didn't know what it was. They didn't even know they were experiencing it from time to time. And so they kind of get stuck there, or they turn back around when they reach that stage, because they reach that stage unconsciously. They reach that level of consciousness, that experience or dimension of consciousness, that body, if you will, that body of experience, that vehicle of experience, that veil that's the true self. Because again, these bodies can be seen as veils also. And so people get confused and they don't know how to proceed from there, and they don't quite find the liberation in themselves that they were promised by the teachers and the teachings. But they don't quite know how to go on, because the nature of the causal body is that of nothingness. And so it seems pretty absolute, but it's not. So this is probably as advanced or as technical as we'll get. This session will be the most advanced, most technical, and also most perhaps intellectually stimulating. So just bear with me here and try to sort of relax and get this as I guide you through the experience. And if you do get it, and if you listen to the session 2-3 times over the course of the next few months, you will begin to understand it as you match it up with your direct experience and with your meditations. And then you're going to be super thankful that you have this knowledge. So bear with me here on the sort of scholarly and intellectually dense representation with these visual images and explanations that I'm giving. But I really believe that if you do get this, and you can get this, that this will greatly accelerate your practice, and it will take you years less to get to the same states of stability and clarity and freedom and liberation and transcendence and self-realization. So the physical body, the quest here is for me. Who am I? Where am I? What am I? As we've already discussed in the previous sessions, whatever I see, essentially I cannot be. Because I'm here being, I am, first of all, and then from that I amness, I am witnessing something. So there's a difference there between me, or at least a seeming difference. Now, ultimately, all is one because it's made of the same substance. But to get out of the illusion, we got to negate certain things. We have to embrace them and accept them as they are, but see at the same time that they don't define who we are, that we're not caught by them, that we're so much more, if you will. We're already free from what we perceive. So the essence is you cannot be what you see, because you're seeing something that's appearing. And you were there before the appearance, you're there during the appearance, and you're going to be there after the disappearance of the appearance. So in the investigation of who am I, if we start with the physical body, which is the grossest, and I don't mean that in terms of it's gross, like yucky. I mean gross in terms of more of a technical term, like there's gross and there's subtle. And again, in the Eastern, in Vedanta and yoga, etc., they describe it literally as the gross body. And they also don't mean the yucky type of gross. They mean the gross, the rough, the coarse, the dense, the tangible, the filled with attributes and observational objective qualities, if you will. So it's very tangible. Just like an apple is more tangible than a daydream. The daydream is subtler, whereas the apple is grosser, is more gross, more coarse, more physical. So the physical body is also known as the gross body. And admittedly, it's also a little bit yucky. It's also a little bit gross. It's also beautiful, but there's some gross stuff going on in there too. So it's fitting. But if we investigate this gross body, if we place our attention, and if you do this right now, that'd be the best way to go about it. So take your attention, first of all, become aware that you're aware. And now investigate, imagine, perceive, see, look at your physical body. And as you look at your physical body, try to find the I in the physical body. See if your I is in your hand, for example, or in your fingers, or in your fingernails. But let's actually start with something we're least identified with, right? Like, let's say the fingernails. Maybe some exceptions. Maybe some of you are really identified with your fingernails. But typically, I'd say people are not really too identified with their fingernails. That's why they can cut it off every week or so and not be in emotional pain about it. Yeah. We don't typically mourn over the loss of our fingernails. So there's not a lot of identity projected into our fingernails. But they are just as much part of the physical body as the physical heart. Now, you could argue it's a less crucial kind of component, but nevertheless, it is a portion, equally so, a portion of the physical body. But you wouldn't say that you're inside of your fingernail, because you have a sense of I right now that's listening to me, a sense of me. And this sense of me, if you go back and forth between the feeling of I, the innermost feeling of I or me, and the observation of the fingernail, and you go back and forth, you realize so clearly that, of course, I am over here, and this fingernail is over there, and it's part of my perception. But I am that which is knowing the fingernail, so I can't be the fingernail. It's pretty obvious with the fingernail. But then you can move it on to the hand. Now, let's say your hand gets cut off. You wouldn't say, I got cut off. You would say, my hand got cut off, right? So you don't really identify with your hand either. I mean, you'd be more afraid to lose it because you're using it on a day-to-day basis. It's more practical. But still, if you look at it closely, you wouldn't say that you are inside of your hand or that your hand defines what you are, that you are your hand. You would say, no, whatever I is, whatever this mysterious I is, it cannot be the hand. So, and you just go through your whole body like that. And even your heart, and even your brain, and even your vocal cords, and your physical eyes, and your senses. And you just continue to look at every aspect of the physical body, although the senses kind of belong to the subtle body in at least 50%, so to speak, which I'll get to in a second. But just your physical body, as it is when it's kind of asleep, if you were to just observe your body while you're sleeping, you would very clearly be able to say, I am not my body. And a lot of people have already reached this state, whether through their practice or unconsciously, to an extent. Because what happens when we grow older? What happens when we mature? Typically, our association of I with the physical body begins to already become subtler, just as a natural result of maturing, as growing older. We become intellectuals more than physical, say, athletes or children that just run around all day and playing in the dirt and wanting to go out and explore the physical world. Of course, some of us still have that also, and that's great. I'm not saying that that's the lower stage. But quite naturally, as we grow older and as we start aging, and as the body, especially as the body starts to age, and our ability to be as physical is also gradually kind of slows down, just naturally, by virtue of growing older, then we typically start identifying more with the mental body, the mind, or the subtle body. Those are all synonyms. We become intellectuals. We become identified with our preferences, our perhaps political views, our values, our morals, our view of the world, our understanding, our discernment, our ability to say yes to this and no to that, our preferences, our biases, our beliefs. We become intellectually oriented. We become more, but also some of us maintain sort of the sense of being a dreamer, and we're using our imagination. That also belongs to the subtle body. The subtle body is not just the intellect. It is also dreams. It's dreaming. It is passion. It is feelings. It is emotions. It is thoughts. So the subtle body is comprised of, it's kind of where the senses of the physical body, the sense organs, are meeting consciousness, there's sort of a meeting point, which we call then the senses, the sense perceptions. So that aspect of the senses is part of the subtle body. So you could roughly say that although the senses have a component in the physical body, if there's nobody to hear the sound that's bumping up against the vibrations that are bumping up against your eardrums, you can't really say there's a sense perception. Now you can look at an object, let's say you're looking at an apple. If the subtle body, the mind, the one who's discerning, the intellect, the one who can call something by a certain name and give definitions to things, if the subtle body doesn't meet the physical body halfway, if you will, and is kind of aloof, maybe you're daydreaming, then your physical eyes, let's say you're in an intense daydream, so you're somewhere else, or you're high or something like that. You're not physically focused. You're not focused on the gross physical body, and you're not focused on the realm within that which that body is interacting and functioning, or the plane, you could say, the physical plane. The physical body relates to the physical plane, and the mental body relates to the mental plane, or the astral planes, or the level of dreaming, imagining, thinking, feeling, etc. So let's say you are in a very intense daydream, just like you're completely absorbed in the daydream to the degree where you basically have 0% of your consciousness focused on your physical body. You're not aware of your physical body. You're only aware of your subtle body and your subtle surroundings, the dreamer, the imaginer. So you're in that daydream. Now, someone could be holding an apple right up to your eyes, but if you're so absorbed in that daydream, you cannot really say that you're seeing the apple. Even though the physical eye, at least hypothetically or theoretically, should be perceiving the apple, there's no experience, there's no perceptual experience, there's no registered experience of the perception of the apple. So even though the senses could be said to have their most extended, or the tip of the iceberg, you could say, of the sense organs belongs to the physical body, actually the majority of them, the operation of them, the meeting point of them with consciousness happens as an aspect of the subtle body. So the sense organs, or the sense perceptions at least, could be described as part of the subtle body, or the mind, the mental body. What's also part of the mental body, or the mind, I just summarize it as the mind, but it's, again, synonymous with the subtle body. And what's also part of that is the intellect. It's your ability to reason. It's your ability to discern. It's your ability to develop preferences and biases and conditioning and programming and preferences. It's your ability to relate to other people. It is your ability to have dreams and desires. Desires are part of the subtle body, for the most part, anyhow. You could say like karmic types of connections or expressions, things that are kind of stored or have a certain momentum that then want to express themselves more. Again, the grooves of your thoughts, programming, and all that. All that, yeah, and also the sense of ego as you know it anyway. As most people know the sense of ego, that's also typically rooted in the ability to conceive of that sense of ego exists as part of the subtle body, or the mind. So it also includes sort of energy pathways. So in the East, they would say it includes the 5 pranic flows, or the main pranas. But just summarize this for yourself as um, any perception of energy, and any sort of electromagnetic flow that supports the body and the organs, and that holds them in their proper position, and that make them function according to the proper information. Again, the subtler energies always support the grosser energies. The grosser energies depend on the subtler energies, whereas the subtler energies can exist without the grosser elements. Is also kind of where the concept of not being able to truly die, or death is an illusion, comes from, which is that the physical body cannot live without the spirit, or the mind, if you will, whereas the mind, or the spirit, at least that is the belief of many, or the experience of many, perhaps even, or the intuition of many, is that the spirit or the mind can exist without the physical body. So the subtler in this analogy outlives, if you will, exists regardless of the coarser components. Just like the sky exists, whether or not there's a cloud or a storm or it's a clear blue sky, the sky is the sky regardless. It's subtler and its existence is not dependent on the clouds. But conversely, the cloud's existence does depend on the sky. And so too, the physical body depends on the spirit, if you will. You could say that when the spirit leaves, the body, unless it's managed in like a sleep state or a coma state, the body wouldn't be able to go on. It wouldn't be able to function. So the grosser elements of energy need the subtler energy of the subtler elements of energy, or the subtler levels of energy. It is the subtler planes that support the existence and interpenetrate and permeate and pervade the grosser aspects of things. Again, just like the sky pervades the clouds, it's everywhere. There's not a part of the cloud where the sky does not exist. Similarly, there's not a part of your physical body where the subtle body does not exist and does not support it electromagnetically. So while it has the function of thinking and discerning and beliefs and desires and dreams, it also has the energy functions that are also part of the subtle body, also summarized as the subtle body or the mind body, the mental body, where those energies support all the organs. And that's why when there is a dis-ease in the mind, in the mental body, that's been perpetuated for long enough, it will manifest itself into the physical body, because the electromagnetics, the subtler energy fields which support the existence and the continuation and the functionality and the balance of the physical manifestation of yourself, or the physical body or veil of yourself, that will respond to those electromagnetic imbalances or energy or pranic imbalances or chakra imbalances, if you will. It will respond to the subtler energy fields, and it will become a manifestation of that. So the subtler fields always influence and determine the grosser fields. Now, there is a field beyond the mind, beyond the subtle body, that most people don't know about, especially not your average Joe who is not into spirituality at all, will have no concept of this, at least not consciously. But even the majority of spiritual seekers have no concept of this. They have no concept of what's actually beyond the subtle body. What supports the subtle body? And this is what in some of the Eastern traditions has been described as the causal body. It's also called the bliss body, because it's also the body of space or nothingness or ignorance. And I'll explain all these. Again, try to follow me here. This is subtle stuff. This is advanced stuff. But if you are able to recognize it, like again, if you look at the diagram, you see that it has a crucial position between enlightenment, which I would say really starts at the point of the witness, and ideally goes beyond the witness into that sort of universal sense of existence, that oneness, that true brightness, that true clarity, that true illumination. And again, that's why it's called enlightenment, because it's like it's illuminating yourself from the inside out. It's like consciousness illuminates itself. It's already self-luminous at that universal God level. And that's what the main intention of this course is to get you into an awareness of the God state, to give you access to that directly, so that you have the tools for the rest of your life to tap into that on your own terms, however much you want to, where you're not dependent on teachings. You can actually directly recognize it for yourself. That's what I'm excited about. That's what's moving this course. So now the causal body is important to understand, because this is kind of like the canyon that people don't know what to do with. On the one hand, there's the canyon of the physical body and the mental body, and we understand these to some degree. We've not investigated them very well, but we take them for granted, and we deal with them on an everyday basis. It's what forms the entire perception of our world. Our relationships, our emotions, our thoughts, our desires, our interactions with the physical world, our interactions with the dream world. So that's what we have knowledge of. That's where subject-object based relationship is predominant. We experience the objects, and we position ourselves in the location of the subject. We believe we're the subject to the objects, and that determines our relationship, and that determines our fears And most of our desires and our wants and our passions are kind of, they spring from the subject-object perception of ourselves. And that's basically all we know. Even the spiritual aspirant, to a great degree, that's all they know, unless they've been really dedicated and committed and they've had proper guidance and they do a lot of meditation, which again, I want to cut the amount of time and confusion needed to really go deep, and I want to make that as minimal as I can for you. But so this is kind of the canyon. When you step off of the edge of the subtle body, if you will, when you take your attention away from the subtle body, you enter into the causal body per default, like automatically. Any one of you, take an average Joe from the street and you somehow manage to guide him to the very end of his subtle body, energetically speaking, like take the elevator beyond the subtle body, then the causal body will be the next plane, the next body, the next veil, the next stage, the next dimension of consciousness, if you will, the next layer of the onion that they will automatically end up into. It's the most logical progression. Can someone step beyond this? Yes, absolutely. But it's just typically not stable. It then goes back and forth. We shoot back into the mind. Even if we have a glimpse of God, we shoot back into the mind and all of our impressions take back over and our distortions. And, 20 seconds later, all we have is a memory of the direct experience. So there's a lot of this oscillation back and forth that can be greatly balanced and stabilized if we include this body of space, or the body of nothingness, or the causal body. If we include this in our understanding, our conscious understanding, we learn to recognize this stage within our consciousness, this level, this veil within our consciousness. It is a body easier to stabilize in. And that gives us the platform. It turns it into a trampoline for us to usher ourselves into the next body, or as some people call it, the end of the line, but it's really not the end of the line. The next body, the next most logical progressional step, is the realization of that pure essence, that God essence, that I am consciousness essence. But again, that is even subtler. God is even subtler. You could say God is the subtlest of all. And therefore, to the mind-based consciousness that's so used to focusing on the subtle body and the physical body, or the first and the second body, to jump to the fourth body of the God state is quite the leap, and it's typically not able to maintain that type of recognition. And that's why I teach the 2 to 5 seconds, is because you can recognize it for 2 to 5 seconds and then repeat that and get familiar with it. Then your ability to recognize the subtle becomes better. You become practiced at it. You increase your ability to recognize the subtle and be less distracted by the obvious and the physical and the tangible and the gross and the overt, which is very important. It's very important to be able to recognize the subtle if you genuinely want to release yourself from the spell you keep yourself in, see through the illusions, and experience the great, amazing, endless bliss and love that is available to you in the God body, the God state. Now, the causal body is like the canyon, if you will, the dark canyon, dark in terms of no light. There's no objects there, even though it itself is an object, which I'll get to in a minute. So it is like you're approaching this edge of the cliff, and everything you know is behind you, which is your physical and your subtle body, or levels of consciousness. And then all you see is kind of this unknown. It's like also the body of ignorance, or the body of no knowledge. It's the unknown to the entity who's so used to thinking through the mind. When in their meditations, they go beyond the mind, the first thing they step into is this nothingness, is this stillness or this emptiness. And often this gets mistaken to be God, or even the absolute beyond God, because it has certain similarities from the mind's ignorant point of view. When you as a consciousness, you've never actually been the mind. That's my proposition. That's my conviction. That's my experience. None of us ever actually become the mind, or the mental body and the physical body. We never become any of that, but we're carrying it within ourselves. as an extension of ourselves, as a way, a vehicle to express ourselves through and have an interactive experience with this grand creation, this grand illusion of perception, so that we can learn and we can wake up to the truth of who we are. But we're so used to operating through thoughts and ego and preferences and biases and discernment and the sense organs and the physical perceptions. We're so used to that that's what we believe ourselves to be. We believe ourselves to live inside of those bodies and inside of those environments. We believe that somehow is me, even though we've never really investigated. Is the me anywhere to be found in the thoughts, in the desires, in the beliefs, in the physical objects, in the physical body, etc.? If you do that investigation wholeheartedly, you will find you're freeing yourself from that matrix of the physical body, and then from the matrix of the subtle body or the mind. And then the next stage you enter into, which is what happens, for example, when you're able to stop thinking for a few seconds. The first perception that you'll have when you reach the end of the mind, if you will, is a perception of like a blankness, but not a mental blankness. It's like stepping into a space that has no lights. And it's not negative. It's not dark in the negative sense, not at all. In fact, it feels very peaceful, typically. It's like, whoa, there's just kind of a nothingness there. There's an ignorance, almost like an unawareness, even though you know you're aware of it. But it's almost like you're not really conscious in the way that you're used to be conscious in, kind of like in deep sleep. You can say when you wake up from deep sleep, well, I had a great sleep, I had a great rest, it was so peaceful, it was so blissful. So there must have been some level of awareness. There must have been some existence during deep sleep. But there was no perception of objects and forms as you're used to in the subtle and the physical body, or the subtle and the gross body, or the mind and the body. So now you step into this territory that's unknown territory, and the mind can't go there. Like the physical body cannot enter your mind. Similarly, the mind cannot enter the causal body, the body of space or nothingness. And so too, the body of space cannot enter the body of pure consciousness or pure awareness. And so too, the realm of pure awareness cannot enter the absolute. So it's like there is this sort of black hole, if you will. There's this entrance point. There's this open back door inside of each body that, just like an elevator going up the levels, you're able to navigate your consciousness back through those open doors, those doors that are cracked open. One who's more aware of it, the door opens more. One who's more intuitive about it, the door opens more. One who's more interested in it, the doors open more. For someone who's not at all occupied with it, the doors are pretty closed, but they're never fully locked. So if you're curious enough, you can open that door and peek into the next realm, just like you do when you take your attention off of the physical realm and you become aware of your dreams and your thoughts and your emotions. Those are all the subtle body components. So all the forms that are not physical, all the forms that you know, all the form-based appearances that have a shape and a size and a dimension and a cause and an effect and a thought about them and a feeling quality, those all belong to the subtle body. Now again, when you step beyond that realm of form, you enter into sort of a formless space. It's the body of space. But because we have no knowledge of that body, we have no direct experience of that body, we're not familiar with that body, you could also call it the body of ignorance, and it has been called that. The causal body, also called the bliss body, Ananda Maya Kosha. And Ananda means bliss. And you will start to fully understand now what the true meaning behind the words, or at least the deeper meaning behind the words, ignorance is bliss. Why do they call this the bliss body? Even though it's not the bliss of the true self, is because peace and not knowing are blissful compared to all the raging activities of thoughts and emotions and desires and pains and suffering and blame and judgment and discernment and needing to figure things out and fend for yourself and strategize. Compared to that whole realm of the mental body, the subtle body, when we take our attention beyond the subtle body, there's like this relaxation. It's like this reset button. It's like the world disappears for a moment. And everything we thought was so real, just it's like not there for us for that period of time. It's like, oh, there's an ignorance of the first two bodies. There's an ignorance of the planes within which the first two bodies operate, the physical world and the dream world or the mental world or the world of imagination. All that is absent now, even if just for a few seconds. And there's a sense of, I can rest here. There's a sense of deep sleep, almost like restfulness. It's almost like the natural state of the mind to return to when it's not active. The state when the mind is not active, what's the container? What's the body? What's the support, the space of support that it falls back into, the natural state of the mind? And you could describe that to be the causal body. But there is nothing there as we know it. There's actually quite a lot there, but there's nothing there as we know it. So it appears to be empty of form, empty of knowledge, empty of information. But it's really, in a sense, the storage container, the deeper storage container for everything that is known, that takes shape. An example that Siddha Rameshwar Maharaj uses is, he was Nisargadatta Maharaj's teacher, for those who are familiar with that lineage. One way that he described it is, it's like the sides of a stage of a theater when you're watching a show and the actors come on stage and they have their props and their toys and whatever they're using and their drama. That's the subtle body. And of course, they're using their physical bodies to express it into the physical world. But then when all the objects and all the toys and all the attributes and the paintings and the canvases and the actors recede back behind the curtains, behind the sides of the stage, that represents kind of things coming to rest in the causal body. But it's also the resource, it's also the container from which they once again arise. So it's not completely without stuff, it's just that the stuff is in a latent state, if you will. It's in a state of non-activity. It's stored information. It's like when you freeze something, and then you unfreeze it, and it starts flowing again. And then you freeze it again. But this body does have the property, the quality of space. So in that sense, it is empty. Even though it's not empty of information or functionality or purpose, because it has the purpose of supporting the subtle body, and it's the cause, therefore causal body, of the subtle and the physical body and the elements and the manifestations. In a sense, you could compare it to the great unconscious mind, if you will, into which even the subconscious and the conscious, in this case, you could say, okay, the physical body is the conscious body, in a sense. The mind is kind of the subconscious body, or at least levels of it are the subconscious and levels of it are the conscious. And then deeper beyond even that, the causal body is kind of the truly unconscious, where things recede back to their most dormant state. So there is information in the causal body. However, that's not even really that relevant for us on our journey. So it's not something to really look for, but it has that property of supporting the subtle body. Both through the quality of space and also being, in a sense, a storage container for everything that then expresses itself in a more noticeable form in the subtle body or the mind and in the physical body as a result. So what happens when you take your awareness, your attention beyond the mind? When you are able, let's say you're able to stop thinking. Or another exercise would be, pretend while you're awake, pretend that your body and your mind are going into deep sleep. And if you pretend this clearly enough, you'll experience what it's like to be awake while sleeping. It's like you're asleep, but you're still there. You're still conscious. And then what remains? When all the concepts have been given away and the attention has receded, one has entered into the causal body perception, the body of space, the body of nothingness, like a room, a very spacious room, where all the lights are turned off and you can't see any of the objects anymore. And all you see wherever you look is like the same kind of nothingness. But it feels peaceful. It's not the same as the mental blank state where you're kind of just like in a dumb state almost, or in a trance state. It's not the same as that. It is an actual state of consciousness, but it's consciousness with no form as we know it. The sense of subject-object is way diminished in the causal body. That's why it's also so peaceful, is because it's like we can relax in sort of not having to be a witness of objects. And we kind of become one with the space of nothingness. Like you would if you do sense deprivation. Let's say you go in a flotation tank, or you imagine withdrawing all your attention away from all the senses and the mind, then it is like that. It is that. That's why people start losing their sense of being their bodies and their minds when they're doing sense deprivation kind of techniques, is because you need objects and forms and senses in order to develop a sense of location within yourself, about yourself. And when you don't have that, it's like you're at peace. There's a blissful restfulness. Now, this is not the true bliss of the self as in God, self capital S, the universal self. This is not the bliss of God. But a lot of aspirants, a lot of practitioners stop at this stage because they don't comprehend it. It either seems inaccessible, like once you're there, you're like, well, why would I want this? This is not interesting enough. Let me go back to all my thoughts and emotions, and because at least there's drama there. Why would you go to a theater, to a drama show, just to watch all the actors and all the props be behind the curtains? Like you want to have some action, no? You want to continue to perpetuate all your thoughts and emotions and belief systems and develop all that stuff because you're identified with it. So a lot of people turn back here because it's not that interesting to spend time in nothingness. But when you mature, you surrender more and more to that because you start to appreciate the bliss of ignorance. You start to appreciate the peacefulness of the body of space, the causal body. So then you become much more interested in actually resting in that natural condition of sort of space-like not knowing. I don't know anything. Unknowing everything. And that feels so peaceful. It feels so rejuvenating, like sleep. But you're doing it while you're awake, which is precious, which is awesome. So you can make conscious use of it. No. And then there's those that are interested in self-realization. And so they do have the motivation. They don't just want to go back to the drama out of attachment and addiction. They are actually mature. They're ready to go deeper, but they also get confused at the causal body. They will, because it's never explained to them. So they'll start meditating. They'll hear the instruction about the pause. The pause in between two thoughts is where you want to be, as an example. Or you want to quiet your mind. You want to be in stillness. You want to be in nothingness. You want to become innocent again and not know anything. And a lot of these descriptions, also the descriptions of God is formless. God is beyond form and space and time. When an entity, when a consciousness taps into the causal body, they will often believe that it's an experience of God directly. Ultimately, everything is an experience of God, but it is cloaked, it is veiled. So we can't really say that the experience of the nothingness or the ignorance or the unknowingness or the peace of the causal body, the body of space, we can't really say that that's the God state. And therefore, the bliss we experience there is not really the bliss that ultimately will set us free from these delusions. So the aspirant wants to go deeper, but doesn't quite know what to do with this space. In fact, oftentimes it calls it the absolute or God. It will believe that it has arrived at God. It believes that when it stops the mind, think nothingness, a spacious, dark, non-conceptual state of consciousness. They will believe that that is God or that that is enlightenment. When it's not, it's just the next layer of the onion. Once you know about this, now it becomes exciting because you can use it as a stepping stone. And it's exciting for two main reasons, in my opinion, anyway. One is because knowing about this body gives you the understanding that it's not your aim, it's not your goal. Your goal is not nothingness. Your goal is enlightenment. It is luminosity. It is brilliance. It is brightness. It is freedom. It is bliss. It is love. It is light. It's not just a peaceful, non-conceptual state of nothingness, which is very functional and great. It resets the body and the mind, the physical, the gross, and the subtle. And it's very useful, even just as a daily functioning. Without it, you wouldn't have a mind and a body. It wouldn't be supported. So you need the space within which the mind can form itself, within which or through which the body can then become projected and created and experienced. So you need this sort of natural state of the causal body. However, it's not God. It won't set you free the way of light and love and bliss and joy and non-duality and true oneness. So that nothingness, I just want you to know, those of you who are working with this type of teaching, I want you to understand the difference between nothingness and God, and finally the absolute. But we won't go into that too much, because I want the focus again of this course to be on realization of God and stability in your practice and accessibility, for you to see how accessible this is and how exciting this is and how liberating this is, and that you can do this. And I want to give you the tools to do it. So again, I'm going to go up to about the God state when it comes to my instructions for this course. I have other material on the absolute, which those who are interested can look further for that. But don't try to overshoot your aim here either. It's a very rare type of realization, and it requires great will and dedication and maturity. So don't try to go there out of sort of a vain idea. Like, don't do it out of vanity, because A, you won't succeed, and B, if you do, it will destabilize you. It's not that helpful if you're not ready for it, if you don't really want it, and if you're not mature enough. So take it one step at a time. You're already able to ignore the physical body level and become aware of your thoughts. Now, when you're aware of your thoughts with 100% of your consciousness, there's 0% of your consciousness aware of what's happening to your physical body and your environment. You can try this out. So if you're 80% body, then there's 20% consciousness body typically. But the same goes if you're 100% in the causal body, there's this stillness and this nothingness, which is not God. It's not self-realization. Do not make that mistake, my loves. But then there is no percentage of attention on the mind, the subtle body, or the physical body. Now, this takes some practice, but you can begin to glimpse this and get already some stability in the causal body. So the first benefit that I was describing is to even know about the existence of this stage or body that's right beyond the mind, in between the mind and God, if you will, is so helpful, because now you're able to recognize it. Now you're able to sort of map it out and say, like, oh, this is where I'm at, instead of believing that it's God or not knowing what to do with the nothingness, because there seems to be no way into whatever you want. So that's the benefit, is that it allows you to move on faster and to have a clear understanding of what's going on. The second benefit is that it will help you, for those who are really interested in enlightenment, and again, it is totally possible for you. It's totally available, more and more every day. You actually do this. You can actually have this experience. This is not just me talking or someone else talking. This is you, about you. This is you talking to you about this possibility. So take this seriously as an opportunity. Do I actually want Buddhahood? Do I actually want enlightenment? Do I actually want liberation? Do I actually want freedom? Do I want my consciousness to be able to be so free that it knows itself so clearly, that it sees through all the myths and all the bullshit and all the conditioning of all the other bodies? You can, and the benefits are indescribably true and beautiful. It's worth it. So let's say that you are interested in that. Then the knowledge of the causal body and being able to directly experience it, and again, I'll point you to that once again more experientially so you can really recognize it. I'll do that in a little bit. But once you're able to recognize the body of nothingness, you're able to recognize it as the stage or veil or body of nothingness, rather than just not know what you're experiencing, but know its location sort of vibrationally being in between the subtle body or the mind and the God state. Now you have something to hold on to. But also, because it's not quite as subtle as God, it is easier to hold on to with your attention. It's easier to maintain. And this is a great benefit, therefore, it can help you stabilize your self-realization and actually save you a lot of time having to go back and forth for a short glimpse of the God state and then back into your turbulent subtle body and physical body life. The nothingness body allows you to establish this sort of Zen background, this pervasive, clear sense of peace and nothingness and stability, so that when your thoughts and emotions arise and when your physical challenges appear, you're able to anchor yourself in that nothingness more and more. You're able to unknow what you're knowing. It doesn't mean you'll actually lose your knowledge. It just means that you're giving up any tension or any holding on to knowledge. Any like, I know this and I know that. Any possession of any knowledge of any experience you've ever had, you relinquish that possession. You deliberately begin to unknow everything. This seems weird. Why would you do that? Well, again, you don't lose the knowledge. If someone shows you an apple, you'll still know it's an apple, right? So in fact, you'll gain more knowledge. You'll gain more clarity. So it sounds a little scary to the mind who's attached to knowledge and bases its ego on it, but you won't lose anything. In fact, you'll only gain stability and clarity and intelligence. So, but the practice is that of sort of forgetting everything more and more often, like just letting go of the knowledge, disidentifying from your knowledge, unknowing yourself and things. And then what remains more and more is this space-like state of stable nothingness. And it's greatly peaceful. It's not the peace of the Creator. It's not the peace of God. It's not the peace that's filled with light to the brim, but it is peaceful. It is like space. It's like exiting the atmosphere of Earth and all the electromagnetic fields and tensions and physical objects and shouts and yells and sense organs. And you're just in this quiet, like space, like vacuum. So it is peaceful. It is blissful in that sense. So ignorance is bliss. The body of ignorance is the body of bliss. So become more ignorant deliberately. Of course, again, you're not going to lose your knowledge and your sensibility and your conventional knowledge. But it's like you deliberately have the courage to become innocent and ignorant, once again, consciously, deliberately, not out of dumbness or lack of capacity for knowledge, but deliberately, because you're so courageous and brave to even undertake that. And you want the peace, you want the innocence, you want the purity. You realize that all your thoughts and points of view are all distortions, and you take pride in them, and they just cause you pain and suffering and electromagnetic tension in the subtle body, which translates into the physical body as disease ultimately over time. It ruins a lot of your relationships and all that. But you believe so much in what you believe in. But when you unknow your stories, you once again enter into the body of innocence, the baseline natural state of the mind. Like sleep. Sleep is innocent. Everyone who's asleep is cute. Well, it depends a little bit. But the energy of someone who's asleep is cute because they're undefended, they're unguarded. They don't have any arguments. They're innocent. Every time we fall into deep sleep, we become innocent yet again. Before we took on the body of knowledge, which in this case, I mean the mind of subjective, objective knowledge, subject-object knowledge. Before we took on the knowledge, we were in the state of innocence. We were in the causal body. So we return to innocence by actively unknowing things. Just give it away. Begin to recognize the direct experience that you enter into. What's the first thing you experience when you step off of the edge of your mind and your sense perceptions? What's right beyond the mind and the senses and the intellect? You'll find direct experience of sort of a nothingness that's hard to describe at first. It's hard to even see it because it's like a dark room when all you're used to is the light being turned on and interacting with objects. So it's hard to even describe what all the lights turned off is like. But again, it's not a darkness, like something to be scary of. It's not a negative. It's not even the absence of your life. Although you don't experience your life in that moment, you're experiencing the causal body, which doesn't have the same ripples and the impressions of the subtle body. Does it have the same perceptions? It's subtler. It's more foundational. It's more truthful, more peaceful. It's a thinner veil that's still covering the God state. Whereas the mind is a thicker veil, and the physical body is an even thicker veil. So imagine a light bulb emitting the pure light of God, and then you put a lampshade over it, and that's beginning to dim it. It's diffusing the light a little bit. You can't directly see the light anymore, but it's still bright. Then you put another lampshade over that, and it becomes even dimmer. Less light gets through. And you put another lampshade over that, and now it's even dimmer. And now it looks, you're almost like you're just looking at the lampshade. There's no real light apparently shining through anymore. That's what it's like with the physical body, the mental body, the subtle body, and ultimately the God body, which is like this light. So I want you to be able to recognize when you're meditating and you're having moments of nothingness, which you can recognize even if you're having thoughts. I can have thoughts appear just like you can have your physical body be, let's say someone is caressing your physical body, it's touching you. You can still be more aware of a dream-like state or of your imagination, or you can be in a thought process. So you can be aware of the subtle body, the mind body, while someone is actually stimulating your physical body. Similarly, your subtle body might be stated with thoughts and emotions or a process or grief or joy, whatever it is, or a passion. Something might come up, might appear in the subtle body, but you don't have to be distracted by it. You can look straight through the impressions and the waves and the vibrations of the subtle body and look straight into that space-like quality of the causal body. Look into the space of the nothingness, of the purity, of the ignorance, of the peace, of no objective knowledge. Again, this is not God, but this is the in-between. This is the canyon in between the world of perception and the world of God. Ultimately, it's all one, yes. But in this process of reversing our steps of delusion and re-enlightening ourselves, this is one of the most helpful understandings to have. Now, the more you're able to recognize and experience directly, take yourself to that state of sort of nothingness, emptiness. The more you can unknow things, the purer you become. Therefore, the more that next back door opens up, the more innocent you become, the more receptive, the more open, the more in true perception you become. Establish. And again, this nothingness is fairly easy to begin to recognize. And God is a little subtler. It's a little more difficult to really recognize that from the state of the mind. Having your consciousness be absorbed in the subtle body and trying to know about the God body and trying to recognize it, it's difficult. It's possible, but it's challenging. And then even if you do, you only maintain it for a glimpse because you have a story about it right away. The body of nothingness or space or ignorance or unknowing or the causal body or the bliss body is your answer to this oscillation, to this confusion, which people can only handle for so long before they grow tired of it and start to have a negative opinion of the path, maybe even because unsuccessful. So then they need more perseverance and more perseverance. But if you stabilize in the body of peaceful nothingness, peaceful, innocent emptiness, and you learn to maintain that more and more, both in your meditations, your dedicated meditation times, but also while someone's talking to you even. Can you see through the mist, through the windshield wiper distractions and look at the road? Can you look through the mist of conversation and dialogue and thoughts and emotions? And while you watch yourself respond to them, can you see the space in which it's all happening? Can you rest in the nothingness, which is unaffected by the subtle body, yet allows for the subtle body to be manifest and projected? All your experiences, in other words. So the space-like foundation of everything that has form and appears as an object, that itself is also an object, but it's the causal body. It's veil covering God, but it's the subtlest veil covering God. God itself being the most subtle veil, the original illusion, the original veil. But for all intents and purposes, the God state is enlightenment. It is the truth. It is the experiential innermost truth. It is what sets you free. It is the state of oneness and all pervasiveness and sort of endless consciousness and bliss and love and light, unconditional bliss, love, light, oneness. All these fancy words, nirvana, it's nirvana. So I hope you get this concept now, conceptually. And if not, again, if you listen to this again, you'll get it. You'll begin to get it. Let's see. Again, the way to experience it is to take yourself to the edge of the mental body. Like, imagine what it's like. Imagine what you were like 100 years before your parents were born. Boom, nothingness, causal body. Imagine what it's like when your body is in total deep sleep and your mind is in deep sleep, but you're in the waking state while you're doing it. It's like a peaceful nothingness. Learn to recognize and identify that perception of nothingness and enhance it. Make it brighter, even though it's dark in a sense. It's the body of ignorance. It's the body of nothingness. But still, you can become more aware of nothingness. You can make nothingness brighter. You can make darkness brighter. You can make ignorance brighter. Then it really becomes stable, like an object you can hold on to in your attention, like a state of space that you can hold on to and continue to recognize while your physical body and your subtle body ultimately are moving through it because of it. And it already gives you so much depth and mastery and transcendence. Doesn't mean you won't feel your triggers and your emotions and that you won't look at them when they appear and you won't take ownership of them. You can still do all that. But at the same time, you've begun to disidentify from these processes. And when you're not identified with the processes, there's no need to discard them. Important point. You see a lot of people discard the illusion because it's not who I am. Well, if it's not who you are, why are you so eager to get rid of it? Riddle me that. You must still be identified with it. Otherwise, you wouldn't resist it or try to get rid of it. Now, the other side of that imbalance would be to be overly indulging in the subtle body and the physical body and call that spirituality or call that enlightenment. Like, oh, it's all about embodiment and it's all about feeling every nuance, and I'm here to enjoy the ice cream and the pain and the pleasure and the suffering and to know all of it. That's why I'm here. There's a beauty in that passion, but it has a limit. It's not the totality of love and balance and wisdom. Sorry, love and wisdom in balance. It is a personalization still of the journey. It is a bias. It is a justification of your emotions and the degree of your distortions, and just falling in love with it in the name of God is the other imbalance. In between those two options of dismissing everything as being illusory or trying to embody everything and like make a juicy teaching out of it, somewhere in between these or transcendent to these two is the ability to investigate very objectively that you're not your body and your mind, and that all is well with the world and yourself, and that all is allowed to be as it is. And you develop this transparent, transcendent awareness that kind of permeates the clouds like the sky permeates the clouds. Now, because you become so confident in the causal body or ultimately the God body, you're looking at things as if you're looking through them. And so their illusory nature becomes more apparent, like seeing through water instead of looking at the surface of the water, seeing the choppy waves. If you have a clear body of water in a glass that's undisturbed, you can look straight through the water. But if you're looking at it from an angle and it's choppy and there's wind blowing, you only see the surface of the water. You can't see through it very well. Similarly, if you disengage, disidentify, if you realize that the I, the me, is not inside of the waves of the physical and the subtle body, if you can realize that, you can start to see through things, like Neo sees through the matrix, if you will, sees through the codes, and therefore is undistracted by the matrix of thoughts and emotion. But because you're so free, you have sort of a natural respect without indulging or over-validating. You have a natural appreciation for the illusion as it appears. And when your subtle body patterns come on, when your conditioning wants to unfold itself, it wants to be seen and resolve itself. It wants to be integrated. It wants to be loved to death. Then you're absolutely available to love it to death. And there's no resistance or, oh, this is illusion, if you're confident in your nature beyond the illusion. So be careful with the black or white type of teachings of, oh, everything is illusion, therefore discard everything. Can be a powerful practice from time to time to quiet your mind and go beyond. But once you've gone beyond and you've recognized the state of at least the causal body, the nothingness, and you see how unaffected this body of space is, and any part of the knowledge doesn't affect it. Once you're confident in that, there's no need to push anything away. There's no need either to indulge in anything. There's just sort of a transcendent mastery, a peace and ability to look at things without getting distracted by them, an ability to deal with things without believing you're a victim of them, or that you're defined by them. Beautiful balance. It's very helpful to have that balance. And the body of nothingness will allow you to unknow yourself back into that innocence and that transcendent view where you already feel stable and bigger than the subtle body. Now the mind and the senses and the intellect and the ego and all your memories, instead of being your whole world, surrounding you, seemingly swallowing you up, it's now in front of you and you can see it as a body, as a veil, as an object. And that's very helpful. Can you imagine seeing all of yourself that you currently feel like is you and you're inside of this world? Suddenly the whole physical and energetic and mental worlds, you can look at them as if from a distance without a need to push anything away. It's just that there's a natural realization of seeing through it, that you're not it. So all this stuff can still happen to the physical and the subtle bodies. But it's like drawing your name in water. It leaves no trace. It's just there for a second. Or it's even, you could say, it's like drawing your name in air. It's like it's not even there while it's there. So there's an emptiness and transparency to it, that the body of nothingness is great to help you stabilize in that type of a balance and transcendence. And now you've trained yourself to be able to recognize the subtler even than thoughts and emotions and dreams and beliefs. And now that you're able to anchor in that subtler body, which is the causal body, now you're in this awesome stability from which you can wake up to the God state, from which something can begin to whisper through the back door, hey, I'm not this space of nothingness. I am witnessing the space of nothingness. So imagine you're in a state of nothingness. The body and the mind are as if they're asleep almost. Even if they're interacting, doesn't make a difference. You can still be in a deep sleep-like state with conscious awareness. Peaceful, undisturbed, space-like nothingness, emptiness. Imagine being anchored in this state, having it be more constant. You can see it as a body. You can begin to see it as a body. It feels to be everywhere, sort of. But ultimately, when the witness wakes up in this state, which is really just an aspect of the God state shining through, it's like something in you begins to wake up to the fact that you, the me, I, your I, let's just say I to yourself, I am aware of nothingness. Now attention starts to turn back even further and enter the back door of nothingness, or the body of space, and realize that there's something even subtler than space. And that's awareness itself. And now you've entered through the door or the window, and the window here represents the witness. A window doesn't really exist. It's just a hole in the wall. Similarly, the witness doesn't really exist. It's a product of having focused on objects. It's like the rainbow doesn't really exist. It's the effect of sunlight and water, and then the appearance of the rainbow is there. It's the third effect. It's that collateral effect. It's collateral to having two other elements come together. Similarly, when you have consciousness of pure awareness, the God state, and you introduce an object of the physical or subtle worlds, now this awareness over time will develop a sense of I'm the subject of this object. But it never really is. There never really is a subject to be found, as in an individual separate witness. Ultimately, all there is to be found is this pure awareness itself, without the thought or idea of being a witness. So, but there is the feeling of the individual witness initially. But that's because imagine that you're in a house and the sun outside represents that pure awareness, that non-dual God state. And you're in your house and you're looking at your physical objects inside your house. And you're doing that using your mind. using your subtle body. So the subtle body inside this house is looking at the physical furniture. The only reason you can even see the furniture is because of the sunlight coming through the window. The window here represents that which doesn't exist, yet appears to be still having a function. The window has the function of letting the sunlight through, but a window doesn't really exist. It's just a hole in something that does appear to exist, which is the wall in this case, the building of the house, which you could say is the causal body. But there's a hole in this causal body. There's this back door, there's this window through which the light of God shines. And so there's this one beam of the sunlight. Sunlight goes everywhere. From the point of view of the sun, there's unconditional radiance in all directions simultaneously. That's synonymous with the God state. That's a symbol of the God state. The witness feels like it's directed. It has a location. It has a point right behind the head, for example. A lot of people feel it there. But really, that's just an illusion produced by our long-standing experience of objects and dimensions and labels. But without all those labels, we mature in the space of nothingness. In the causal body, we mature, we become more subtle in our orientation and our ability to recognize consciousness at a subtler level. It prepares us to awaken to the witness, or rather to the God state, through the feeling of the witness that's looking at the nothingness. So again, the causal body is like the house itself. The person inside is like the mental body or the subtle body. And the furniture that it's looking at is like the physical body or the physical environment. All of the perception there, all of the reasoning of the person that's able to discern and reason and have preferences for which furniture to sit on, all that is the subtle body. And all that perception is made possible because light hits the furniture all the way through all the layers. So it's always there. Everything that's an experience is enabled by God's light, by the light of pure awareness. It's always shining through. That's why you could teach people to go directly to the God state, but their ability to maintain or deepen in that recognition is difficult because the impressions of the mind, that they can only get these really short glimpses, which can be very powerful, but then they start questioning these glimpses when they're not in the glimpses. And they start turning it into a conceptual thing, or they start taking pride in it, or they believe they're already there or here or there, whatever it is. And then the true desire to go deeper doesn't usually spark itself again until years later, or after some of the confusion has dissipated, or some of the jadedness and disappointment has left them. They've recovered from that. Many, many years, sometimes decades, sometimes lifetimes can be spared by having conscious knowledge that the space which one enters into right beyond the mind is a space of innocent, ignorant, causal emptiness, which is like the space in between the mind and God. And there's one more step to go. But you can stabilize in space easier than you can stabilize in God when you're used to being identified with the mind and the body. So this is like the reset button. It's like where you reset all the software of your mind and body activity, and you come to a restful state. You don't have to go all the way with this, but solid enough to where you are able to be stable in the nothingness. So just for a few months, just focusing on stabilizing in the nothingness. And then again, in your deeper meditation on the nothingness, knowing that it's not the absolute, not taking pride in it, just being innocent in it, resting in it, unknowing everything into it, giving back everything to that piece of not knowing. Then recognize that something from the back window is shining through, and this little point of light, this little ray of the sun shines through the window, through the causal body. And that's like the individual witness looking at the causal body of nothingness, within that the subtle body of the mind, and within that the physical world. So you continue to retrace. Now you ask yourself, oh, if I'm witnessing, if I'm aware of this nothingness, that means I am not in the nothingness. The nothingness is not in me, just like I am not in my physical hand, and I am not in my thoughts. I must be beyond even the space of nothingness, because I witness the nothingness. Again, whatever you see, you cannot be. And now you kind of enter through that window of the witness feeling. But as soon as you're outside of the window, you realize it's just the light of God radiant in all directions. It's like this universal sense of isness. And that's kind of the feeling of the individual I am merging with the universal God I am. And that's just a way of saying it. Don't get too distracted by that description. But it feels kind of like the droplet falling back into the ocean of universal isness. And there's just this intuitive, deep, profound, clear, vibrant knowing of the isness beyond even your thoughts and even space. There's just this self-illuminated light of consciousness, light of the self, awareness, love, light in one. Satchit Ananda, the self, the true self. This is the fourth body in the system that I appreciate the most. It's called the great causal body because it's the causal of the causal, if you will. It's also just called the God state. It's also called the Brahman. And that equals God. That equals enlightenment for all intents and purposes. Then you'll be able to rest in awareness as awareness, and the brightness of the God state can increase to itself. The knowledge, it's also called the body of knowledge, by the way. The fourth body, or the great causal body, or the supracausal body. It's also described as the body of knowledge versus the body of ignorance, which is the causal body, where there is no knowledge of either form nor of awareness. But this fourth body, the God state, is also called the body of knowledge. Knowledge, capital K. Not knowledge of this or that object, not specific knowledge. Knowledge of the subject itself. Knowledge of the God state itself. Knowledge of itself, self-knowledge. So you could say the body of realization, or the body of recognition, or the body of knowledge. It's that universal, primordial illusion. It's that first, super subtle, first lamp shape that goes around the absolute. It's the first sheath for the absolute to be cloaked by, if you will. The first layer or veil that goes over. And it's subtle. It's super subtle. So if you stabilize into nothingness, you'll have so much more fun beginning to recognize the God state, and so much more stability in it. And you'll be amazed. Like, you'll be so happy and delighted at how free you're able to experience yourself to be whenever you want to, and more automatically. You'll be in a completely different state of consciousness, even while you're still able to interact through all these other bodies. It's quite the miracle, quite the mystery. It deserves great respect. It deserves great love, appreciation, gratitude, and awe, which help you deepen your humility, which help you deepen your emptiness, which help you cross that canyon of nothingness into the state of God, of true, absolute love, enlightened innocence. Like I said, this is quite advanced information. My intention has been to keep it as simple as I can. That's why I've used analogies and described it in different ways. But also at the same time, I want to have trust in the viewer's ability that even if they are new, in their ability to trust this information, first of all, and that it's possible, and that it's relevant. And once they have that sense of this is relevant and I am excited about it, then it's okay that if it's a little bit, if it goes over your head a little bit, you can come back to it and you can begin to put these dots together now that you have this conscious information. While you're meditating and experiencing, it will clarify a lot for you, and it will give you an exciting handle to hold on to, a map for you to be like, oh, exciting, now I'm here. And for me to get from here to here, I just need to shift my attention in this way. So it becomes more accessible, you see, and then you believe it more for yourself. Instead of just meditating beyond the mind and without knowing it, being in the body of ignorance, and then getting frustrated after a few months, like, what is this? I don't know, I can't do anything with this. and then you return back to your everyday life in a conventional sense, and you've lost your sort of sense of adventure and your sense of possibility. And then you have to recover from that. And sometimes people get a little jaded and a little nihilistic, or a little, I just want that to be avoided. I want you to understand the joy of God is calling you forth. The joy of the true state of your universal consciousness is what's drawing you into this conversation. And so just know there is this canyon of nothingness, which is greatly helpful once you're able to recognize it, and once you know its function, and once you know that it can be used as a trampoline. To tighten the trampoline by stabilizing in nothingness allows you to jump into the witness, or through the window and into the God state, at which point you'll see the witness is just a thought. It's just a rainbow effect created through subject-object experience. Put consciousness, pure consciousness, and object perception together, and you'll get the third illusory effect, which is the rainbow effect of the ego, or the sense of the witness, or the individual point of view. Doesn't mean there is no actual essence to your individuation. There is, but it's not the way we experience it. And it doesn't have that limitation of being separate, or being positioned or located somewhere. Your individual essence is like God, just as free as God, and it is ultimately rooted in the God self. And ultimately, you're beyond even that. Even when all that is disappears, even when the light that makes up all that is disappears, if it ever would, you remain, you transcend, you are more supreme, you are more original, you are truly uncreated, truly timeless. You're not just eternal like God, you're timeless. You've never appeared. God appeared. At some point, the quality of consciousness and existence and bliss and creation and all that appeared. So it cannot be absolute. You never appeared. Even just like in the nothingness state, you realized, hey, wait a second, I'm aware of the body of nothingness. And so you wake up into the God state. Similarly, if you stabilize and amp up the brightness, the self-luminosity of the God state, you can begin to have the realization that there is a me before that universal I am. That me, or I, the absolute I, somehow knows God consciousness, and God consciousness doesn't know the I. It has its limitation. No body can go into the former body, but yet it only owes its existence to that prior body. Me is witnessing the universal I. Who is that me? Again, I'm not going to go into that too much, but just to give you the full picture. So your homework would be to begin to identify the body of nothingness, just that peaceful body of ignorance, and begin to rest in that state. Give more and more of your ego, as it's found in the subtle body, back to sort of this space like innocent, simple nothingness. Peaceful. Begin to unknow everything that you think you know. Surrender your knowledge. Become ignorant, but consciously, blissfully ignorant, deliberately ignorant. Therefore, you don't lose any of your intelligence or smartness. It's just a choice to unknow things so that you can know the unknown. You can know the non-knowing. You can know the peace of blissful natural state, similar to deep sleep, but while awake. And then from that state, wake up to the fact that you're aware of it. But first, the homework is to stabilize in the nothingness, to be able to identify it, first of all. Once you identify the causal body beyond the subtle or mental body, then once you're identifying it, once you're able to recognize it, then you can maintain it more and more. You can go there, so to speak. You can conjure it up. You can focus through the mist of the other two bodies and rest in the spaciousness of just knowing the unknowing, knowing the body of space or nothingness. That's your homework. Let's see how we're doing on time. So, oh yeah, well, actually, I'm going to finish with another analogy, which I drew. So if you can flip over to the next page. I'm going to give this one more analogy to you guys that will help you in recognizing this as well. And after that, I think we sort of reached the end of our attention span. And so I understand if you have questions about this topic, just post them in the Bentinho Massaro Teaching and Community Facebook group, if you're on Facebook. If not, I understand. We are halfway through our course together. So again, this is about as advanced as I want to go. After this, I want to just be supportive to whatever you need. I want to use these bi-weekly meetings as reminders, as experiential anchors for us to really get into that state together. This is just about all the concepts that I want to give you when it comes to the art of self-realization. You've got more than enough knowledge than you need right now. You've got the overview, you've got the pictures, you've got the map, basically. There's not much more that you would ever really need to know intellectually in order to be able to go on this journey experientially. So the next 4 sessions, I want to focus more on helping you experientially recognize these states, stabilizing it. Of course, I'm going to talk and make distinctions and give insights, and that will help you further deepen. But in terms of laying out the map, I think we've pretty much completed the whole thing. We've even gone quite advanced today. So I don't intend for next week to be even more advanced or like more detailed. I intend for it to go back to the heart of it, which is the direct experience of it, to sort of spend time in the space together and to answer more of your questions. So there won't be any questions again this session. I just want to get all this content out there to you. Now you have the map. Please review some of these episodes. It's going to be greatly helpful for you. Ask your questions, and I'm sure we have a list now of questions you've asked during this session. We won't get to answering them in this session, but the next session next sessions, I intend to answer much more of your questions so that I can clarify some of the subtleties as it pertains to the art or the map or the overview of self-realization, and then coax it back to the direct experience as much as possible, make it accessible, remember together to be in that space, to enlighten ourselves, and then to let that naturally radiate out into the outer worlds, the planes with which our bodies are in interaction with. Change the electromagnetic nature of our fields naturally through our self-realization practice, and therefore also shift the timelines and the experiences that we generate and that we're in, that we're aware of, because this big vacuum of potential just collapses based on our state of being right in front of our eyes. It is all an illusion ultimately. And so it's important to enlighten ourselves and to, again, use this quarantine as a way to go deeper inside, to shed all of our skins, our layers that are not true, to go through those layers and to become more and more anchored in first the causal body, which gives us a great peace and stability, and then the illuminated body, the God body. I'm excited for you guys. I'm excited for you to make this experiential. So one more analogy here, and then we'll call it a night. And then the next session, I'll answer some of your questions for sure. So the diagram is up in the screen, up here. And the weather tomorrow, if you watch the clouds over here, so the earth in this picture represents the physical body, or the gross body, or the gross world, or the gross plane, you could say. Around the earth is the atmosphere. The atmosphere is subtler than the physical nature of the earth. It's more gaseous in nature. It has gases and elements and all that floating around. So the atmosphere kind of represents the aura, the electromagnetic body, the subtle body, the body of thoughts and dreams and imaginations and so forth, the intellect. Then the pure dark space that you would enter into if you used the shuttle of the spirit, so to speak, and you would take off from planet Earth, you would then be in the subtle body of the atmosphere. There's still gravity there, but So there's still the like gravity towards the world of form and objects, but it's subtler. You have a much bigger overview, much more freedom to move about and stuff. But if you penetrate through the subtlest layers of the atmosphere, at some point you enter into pure space. But imagine that this space does not have the sun yet. It does not, in fact, doesn't have any suns. No stars are illuminated. They're all dark. They're all black or non-existent. What would the experience be like when you enter into the third body, the causal body of that space, or nothingness, or emptiness, or void? What would the experience be if you take that shuttle of the spirit and you penetrate through the subtle body, the atmosphere, and you suddenly enter into nothingness? You would just see nothingness. You would just become aware of the experience of nothingness, of space like nothingness, because there's no stars, there's no reference points. Now, if you're brave enough to continue to traverse that nothingness, get used to that nothingness, become familiar with it, become innocent in it, become surrendered in it, and then you're more stable in it, you become familiar with it, you befriend it. Now, it's like this single ray of the sun hits the back of your shuttle, and it starts to warm up your insides, if you will. It starts to illuminate you from behind, and you're like, whoa, there's a light that starts to penetrate through this third body. And then as you turn around towards that witness, it reveals itself to have the source of the sun. And now you move into that sunlight, which represents the fourth body, or the great causal body, or the God state. Now that the God state has been realized, the experience of the causal body, or pure space, changes. The element of ignorance is removed, because now it's permeated with the sunlight, or the body of knowledge, the body of self-awareness. So now you can't really say that the causal body is the body of ignorance anymore, but it maintains its quality of being like space or emptiness. So ultimately, the third body is truly more of the nature of spacious sort of emptiness than it is of ignorance. Because again, it has a function. It's just super subtle function, and we could call it unconscious. The functioning of it is unconscious to us. We can't comprehend it with what we're used to of looking at forms in the conscious mind. So it has functionality. It's not completely void, just like space is not completely void, but it does have the quality of space, of being that spacious container, of being that holding space. So that quality it maintains to continue to function. But it no longer seems ignorant to us. It now seems to be gone. The element of ignorance seems to be gone, because now there's the light of the sun. And the light of the sun doesn't know the darkness of space. It just knows the brightness of space, because all it sees, it travels along its own radiance. So yes, it experiences spaciousness for its light to travel through, but from its own vantage point of the light, it doesn't experience darkness. It doesn't experience ignorance. It just experiences knowledge of itself, awareness of itself. But the space quality remains, so that the sun can illuminate through that space, and the space can hold the mind and the physical worlds, etc. This makes sense. You can use this as an analogy, where the earth is the physical body, the atmosphere is your subtle body and your mind, and pure space, at first dark, because the sun hasn't been activated yet. You're not yet aware of the sun, even though it's fully here, blazingly radiating throughout your experience as we speak. Otherwise, you would not hear my voice. You would not see your mind. You would not know your thoughts. You would not know your emotions. You would not know the space within which it occurs. It's all because the knower is already alive, but it hasn't been realized fully, right? So at first, it seems like nothingness and ignorance. But then when the sun awakens to itself, when you're like, hey, I'm aware of the nothingness, what's that awareness? And you go further back, if you will. Now, this light is all you see. You see the universal light. And so there is no ignorance or darkness. There's just brightness pervading the quality of space, the body of space, illuminating all the thoughts and impressions of the subtle and energetic bodies or body. And then ultimately illuminating the nature of physicality, or what we think of as the physical world. Then in material, I know you're going to have to watch this again, many of you, and that's great. I think you should. I just want to get that out there. Sorry if it went too fast for some of you, but again, just replay it, rewatch it. The next few sessions, we'll just be more relaxed. We'll just be more experiential. We'll just be doing some guided meditations. I'll be answering some of your questions. If a particular theme pops up for me that week, I might still give a little discourse on some different topics, just slip them in there for you to also rewatch and learn from. But the essence of mapping out the art of self-realization, basically now you have everything you need to know. You know it's possible. You believe it's possible for you. You found some access points to it. We've given you some meditative techniques that are the most essential. Now you sort of have an overview of what you can expect when you use those meditation techniques and you go deeper and deeper. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, going towards the I am, and then traversing through the body of space while you try to get to sort of that pure knowledge of the I am. You're in this spaciousness. Now you know exactly what that means. Now you can use that to stabilize in without trying to be all fully enlightened right at once, just like stabilize in a nothingness, knowing that there's a light that pervades the nothingness, which you will begin to realize more of. So you've got everything you need, my friends. But let's deepen in this understanding together over the next 2 weeks, the next 4 sessions, and I will be answering your questions. Let's have a moment of silence together, a moment of transmission and consciousness, a moment of nothingness coupled with the light of God. See if you can notice that feeling of not knowing anything, not being aware of any particular thing. It's just kind of a spacious blankness, an experience of nothingness. And notice how stable it is. It's like a mountain. It's like the earth itself. It's like the foundation. Space is super stable. It allows for planets and galaxies and billions of asteroids to swirl through its space without ever being affected. This is the nature of the causal body. It's like space. Be like space. Let everything be and come and go as it wants. You focus through the mist of all these appearances and undo yourself. Come clean, come back into innocence and ignorance and stability of peaceful, space-like knowingness of not knowing. Identify that space, that body. It's actually like observing a body. Observe the body of nothingness. Observe the body of space. And see if you can maintain that more and more throughout the upcoming days and weeks. First identify it, notice it. Oh yeah. When I stop thinking, boom. There's this nothingness, a space. Now that I'm able to identify it, can I maintain it? Can I stay there? Can I, quote unquote, hold on to nothingness? Or you could say, let go into nothingness. But maintain it more and more. Oh, this will stabilize you so much, so quick, rather than keep you thinking about enlightenment from a mental point of view. Just like undo the mind more and more. Don't worry. You'll continue to be able to do everything you're currently doing and more skillfully. Just become innocent. Relinquish your knowledge of objects. Come back to the stability of space-like darkness or nothingness. But it's peaceful, it's positive. And it has its own sense of bliss already. Already has a measure of bliss to it. A measure of relief and ease and joy. Transcendence. to the worlds you're so interactive with every day. So give it a rest. This is like resting. Rest in nothingness. Maintain the rest in nothingness. Continue to rest in nothingness. And then this becomes your trampoline, your jumping off platform for the even subtler God body of awareness, love, light. This non-dual, universal, substratum, essential light of all that is. The pure isness, the pure singular identity that pervades the entire creation. And then you allow that light to shine through the nothingness body. And that's the body of pure knowledge. That is the true bliss. That's the true joy. That's the true freedom. The true light. That's where you can't help but smile from ear to ear sometimes. It's the source of all of life. It's life itself. It's aliveness itself. It's being alive itself. It's existence itself. It's knowledge of itself. Awareness of itself. God. It's all yours. You've got all the tools. You already are all of these bodies and more. There are no obstacles except the ones you imagine. You've got everything you need to undo your delusions. And you've got my love, and you've got my support, and you've got these videos to replay, and tons of other material if you ever need it. You've got community to support you. And you've got this, even on your own, you've got this. It's right there. It's looking through all your bodies, through the eyes right now. The source of all that, the source of your ability to even know that I'm speaking is God, the first manifestation. Free awareness, love, light. It's right now talking to itself, hearing itself through different bodies, through different illusory vehicles. It's quite mind-boggling. Like a hallucination. With the purpose of self-realization and self-exploration and self-expression. With the purpose of ultimately leading one to self-knowledge, leading God to self-knowledge on behalf of the Absolute. Thank you.